on if necessary there. So I think with that, we'll kind of start in. Again, COVID-19 has, of course, impacted all of our lives and the shelter-in-place order, and so I appreciate everybody joining together virtually, even though we can't be across the table from one another. I think at this point, we've all gotten pretty used to doing business this way on a daily basis. So we have been delayed, but we're not deterred. We will press on and use this time as we press on with the development of the update of the state water plan. I guess I will ask first, there was the possibility that someone from the governor's office was going to join today. Is there anybody from the governor's office that has joined us today? All right, hearing nobody there, I believe it was also the intent of somebody from the Lieutenant Governor's office to join today. Is there somebody from the Lieutenant Governor's office on the phone?
Hi, yes, this is Levi Bain, Dunn Fellow in the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. And just as an FYI, I plan to stay on for as long as I can, but I do have another meeting that conflicts, so I will be hopping off before the meeting is able to finish.
All right, well, thank you, Levi. Thanks for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to say for opening remarks, or we'll move on?
Nothing really for opening remarks other than looking forward to hearing about some of the work that y'all have ongoing and being able to start thinking about how our office can help support the work of this task force and the different stakeholders on this task force.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we're happy that you're able to join us for a while today. We also have on the phone with us this morning John Rogner, who is the Deputy Director of the IDNR. Welcome, John. Would you like to say a few words before I begin? John, you may be muted. He may have gotten called away, so we'll come back to John if he's able to join us later at that point. Well, I wanted to, as we get into part of the welcome here, I wanted to go over a couple of things, part of which I stole from the Iowa water plan as I was looking at some of the other water plans around the Midwest. But water planning efforts, they typically identify problems and needs, but simply calling attention to issues is usually not enough to necessarily spur action. Because there's been many well-intentioned planning efforts that end up as a report that gather dust on the shelf. And I know we've talked about this in some of our meetings before, that is not what we want to happen here. We would like more of an interactive kind of a plan that stays engaged. And so one of the things we want to do is avoid vague recommendations like, water conservation measures should be implemented. That usually accomplishes little because they don't really assign any responsibility to anyone. Success is more likely when we're able to have an implementation strategy, right? Who can and who should do what. That's developed as part of the plan. More specific that an implementation strategy or identified goal that is, the greater the chance we have that something will actually get done. I encourage you that the plan should identify who has the legal authority, who has the responsibility to do what, and who else could help us do that. What are new laws or programs needed, or can we use existing ones to implement our recommendations? Water issues are complex, and the strategies to bring about those changes in water policy often include an array of agencies and many of our programs. Those agencies and programs are represented by all of those agencies on the State Water Plan Task Force that as we gather today. Agencies that have fundamentally different authorities and objectives. And so our plan needs to be developed in such a way that it does not appear like we are a collection of siloed agencies, but rather that the key state issues be addressed in a unified front of state agency resources. So as you identify your agency's assigned issue, think about defining
Hey,
specific.
Barb?
Excuse me? If you could mute your phones if you're not on mute, that would be wonderful. So again, as we develop the plan, we want to think about specifics, and as we define the issue, to avoid vague generalities, and we want to work to define specific needs and specific problems that specifically impact the health of the citizens of Illinois and their environment. Specific definition of issues will help us determine specific implementation actions and recommendations that again help protect the health of the citizens of Illinois and their environment. I also want to talk about social and environmental justice, because social and environmental justice cuts across each of the critical issues that we've identified in the updated State Water Plan. And as such, the Governor's Office has appropriately directed us that the plan, the updated State Water Plan, should consider social and environmental justice matters in each of the issues, and strive to engage social and environmental justice in all implementable plan actions and recommendations in the plan. You know, the idea of social justice is that people would have equal access to wealth and health and well-being, justice, privileges, and opportunities regardless of their race, gender, religion, or other legal, political, or economic circumstances. Social justice involves around favoring or punishing different groups of populations regardless of any, I'm sorry, not social justice, social injustice would revolve around favoring or punishing different groups of the population regardless of any given individual's choices or actions based on value judgments regarding historical events, current conditions, and group relations. And in economic terms, this often means redistribution of wealth and income and economic opportunities. Similarly, the EPA defines the term environmental justice as environmental justice is based on the principle that all people should be protected from environmental pollution and have the right to clean and healthy environment. Environmental justice is the protection of the health of the people of Illinois and its environment, equality in the administration of the state's programs, and the provisions of adequate opportunities for meaningful involvement of all people with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of the water-related laws, regulations, and policies. So it's easy to see how social and environmental justice weaves into each of the identified State Water Plan issues that we've laid out. So I would ask that you consider social and environmental justice matters as you refine your agency's assigned plan issue, and then strive to engage social and environmental justice in all implementable plan actions and recommendations that would, again, protect the health and interests of the citizens of Illinois and the environment. We're fortunate today to have Chris Presnall on the call with us, who serves as IEPA's Environmental Justice Coordinator. And Chris has agreed to help the task force kind of on this endeavor, to be the overseer, make sure we don't get into left field on some of these issues, but keep it as a cross-cutting issue across all of the water resource issues that we do. And so he'll serve as a resource for us as well. If we have questions related to, environmental justice, we can give Chris a call. And so at this point, before we go on, I might turn it over to Chris for a moment or two to see if you have any comments.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. Again, this is Chris Presnall. I thought that was a fantastic introduction. And I would just really reiterate what you said as far as me being a resource, and then make a couple other points. As many people on this call and certainly members of the Illinois Environmental Council know, we also have the Illinois Commission on Environmental Justice that could be, as agencies move forward, as an additional resource in addition to IEC and their work on environmental justice. We have a lot of resources for agencies to help work on these issues. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Illinois Commission on Environmental Justice, it is a statutory commission. We're looking to reinvigorate it here in the near term, and part of that is there's a number of agencies, including the IDNR, that are statutory participants. And so I'm working with IDNR, I'm working with other agencies to, to reinvigorate that. So we've got a lot of resources. I can be a point of contact, folks in the environmental justice communities that I work with. So yes, please utilize the resources. And again, Lauren, I thought you did a great job of providing an overview on the issues, and we're obviously seeing these play out in real time on the streets all over America. It's all intertwined. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. We'll probably hear more about that as we move on. Before we get into our next item on the agenda, I wanted to see if John Rogner was able to join us again. John, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so sorry, I was on my phone and unmuted that and talked into it, but nobody heard it. So I had to connect to the computer, but all is well. Thanks for the great introduction, Lauren. That was really good. And fortunately, you covered some of the points that I would have covered. So I will just say welcome both to our state agency partners today. Thanks for joining with the DNR on this task force and this exercise of leading the development of a state water plan. We recognize it's not mandated in law, and we're all doing it because we feel very strongly about it. So thanks to you, and thanks to our partners today who've offered to join with us in both development and implementation. You know, the historic model for government planning is we go away and do much of the development of our plan internally. We draft it, then we go to the public for comment, and then we finalize it. And we've been moving away from that model for quite a few years, but today I think we're going to take a distinct step in this process in moving toward this modified structure where we welcome stakeholder organizations as full partners in the development and ultimately the implementation of this. And I really look forward to hearing the Illinois Environmental Council's ideas today on how that might work. I'll add that integrating stakeholders into this process as full partners is a necessity these days. You know, we as state agencies, we will be strong partners and we will provide leadership, but you all know our resources have been really diminished over the years, and we need help from other sectors, particularly on certain issues like social justice. And Lauren, you covered that in an excellent way. And I'll look forward to everyone's thoughts today on how we make that a prominent feature of the plan. And I'll end just by saying that one of the DNR's fundamental operating principles today is collaboration, working with and through others to accomplish our shared goals and our shared objectives. We intend to carry that out in practice, and we welcome everyone's thoughts today on how we form a stronger collaborative as we move forward on the next phases of the state water plan. I'll stop there, Lauren, and turn it back to you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, John. Well said. So as we get ready to move on to item number 2 on the agenda, near the end of March, IDNR was asked to brief the Illinois Environmental Water Council on the State Water Plan Update Initiative. And shortly thereafter, the Illinois Environmental Council shared a memo that outlined some of their insights and recommendations and support opportunities for the State Water Plan update. And so rather than wait for the council to present these insights at our now delayed, much delayed public outreach events later this year, or to have DNR have to serve as kind of a middleman between the Environmental Council and the agency members of the task force, I thought it would serve the task force well to hear directly from the Illinois Environmental Council during this meeting, especially in terms of how they can support and resource the updates to the plan. And we may have opportunity going forward to hear insights from other interested parties as well between now and when we eventually have our first series of public outreach meetings about the State Water Plan. And so with that said, please welcome Ayana Simba from the Illinois Environmental Council to start us off on an overview and an IEC presentation.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for that great introduction. Everybody can see my screen. They can see the presentation. Okay, I'll take that as a yes.
I am not saying it, Ayana, just so you know. There's a button down at the bottom with an arrow pointing up that says share content. You may have to click on that and then select your, yep, looks like it's starting to come up now. Yep, we have it on the screen. It's all yours. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So as Lauren said, my name is Ayana Simba. I am the Clean Water Advocate for the Illinois Environmental Council. And today I'm going to kick us off as far as our vision for the State Water Plan, talking about, why do we care? Why is this plan important to us? And overall, what is our intention? And we'll have a few other IEC members that will present and dig in a little bit deeper more into our mission and goals that we want to be baked into the plan. So why do we care? So we care for obvious reasons, but most importantly, this is the first time that the plan has been updated in nearly 40 years. And with that being said, this provides us with a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-generation opportunity to truly shape how water is used and protected in Illinois. And at the same time, it also is a greater opportunity for not only NGO engagement, but also public engagement. And this is also happening at a very critical moment. We have things like climate change, we have environmental justice, we have declining federal dollars. But at the same time, we also have a greater public awareness of these issues and their importance related to water. So in short, it's important because it's happening at a critical moment. And we want to make sure that the next 30 years of water planning in the state is well guided and is on behalf of not only our own NGO beliefs, but also on the public. And to the second point, IEC and our affiliate members, we are dedicated to conservation, planning, environmental protection, and justice. And so we want to play a role in providing feedback and input with the overall goal of supporting and enhancing the State Water Plan, its processes, and its outcomes. And then finally, the State Water Plan, we understand that it's important not just in its relation to natural resources and the environment, but it's also important in relation to Illinois residents. Therefore, we're committed to helping in any way that we can to ensure that the planning process, the outputs and the implementation efforts are delivered for the people of Illinois, so that we're protecting water not just for the sake of protecting it, but also how it serves Illinois residents. Okay, and so how do we plan to help? So we plan to help in three distinct ways. One, we want to provide issue and planning expertise. I had hinted to that on the first slide as far as providing support and feedback and input. But we also have compiled a list of our IEC members who would like to engage in the subcommittee, each of the subcommittee issue areas. And so I've shared that with Wes and Lauren, and I hope that they'd be able to distribute that with this group as well. And then secondly, we want to support public outreach. So we've actually created a public survey that can be used during the public outreach meetings, but also as a way to engage folks who can't necessarily make those public meetings too. And then finally, we want to mobilize our network to engage diverse constituencies. So once those public engagement meetings actually do happen, we want to be able to use our networks and ensure an active participation in the State Water Plan. And then overall, what is our intention, right? We agree that the existing mission and goals should support a strong and collaborative process that engages all agencies and partners. needed to improve and protect our state's water. But at the same time, we also want the plan to support our common mission or goal, and that is to ensure that all Illinois residents have equitable access to clean, living, healthy waters that are swimmable and fishable. And so I just wanted to lay out, just so people understand, like, why we care, why we want to be involved in this. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to Josh Ellis from the Metropolitan Planning Council, and he'll dig a little bit deeper into the mission and goals and the principles that we hope to have baked into the state water plan.
Thanks, Deanna. You can move to the next slide. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us here today. I have the pleasure of knowing most of the folks on the call. You can be the judge as to whether you have the pleasure of knowing me. But so we, in thinking through and looking through the existing materials, I mean, this harkens back to some of what Lauren and John were saying at the outset. Like, the current mission is stated and appears to have been guiding things to this point is literally just to create a plan. And we want to open up that discussion about what the actual mission and purpose of all this is. Is it just to create a plan, or is it to create a plan that actually affects positive change here in the state? And so our proposed sort of rewrite of this, and that we'd want to think through in each of the subcommittees as a whole, is instead to develop an integrated, tightly coordinated, well-resourced plan to ensure equitable access to safe, clean, living waters and the development of sustainable water resources for people and wildlife of Illinois now and long into the future. To bake some value-driven goals, some value-driven orientation right into the mission, and make that a lot clearer. Next slide. I'm going fast so that we can get to discussion. Again, the current goals, as outlined in the materials that we've seen, are very process-oriented. They're procedural steps in plan development. Identify the issues, make recommendations to address the issues, implement the right. You see them here. I think what we're hoping to work with you on is a better identification of those goals and values that inform how we are making the recommendations. Recommendations to what end? Form needs to follow function here. And as of right now, because the goals are all process oriented and not value oriented, it's not clear what our North Star is other than completing a plan. Next slide. So as we've been looking through this, what we want to suggest and again bring to the various subcommittees are some specific goals related to water resource management. And you heard Ayanna state some of these, and some of this harkens back to what Lauren was saying at the beginning, that we want to ensure that water is accessible to all, regardless of race, income, housing status, or geography, right? We have process goals to make sure that there's alignment between committees, that there's alignment between the state agencies and some of the outside entities that want to participate on how communication is going to occur, and to ensure that everyone is doing their work in the direction of these overarching goals that we set. And then we're really focused on plan implementation. To Lauren's point, we can have a plan and sit there, or the plan can drive budgeting, staffing, legislation, administrative changes, communications. It can drive a whole lot of things. And if we have a bigger base and a more diverse base of people bought into the plan and paying attention to and participating in implementation, it just makes the plan make that difference. Next slide. And so when we talk about values and principles, here are some suggestions. And again, this echoes what Lauren was saying at the beginning. And here, you can see the words, environmental justice, equity are here. But what we really need to do, we feel, as part of the process is to interrogate, for instance, within the different issues, Lake Michigan as an issue, stream monitoring as an issue, like all these different issues that have been identified. What does environmental justice in management of Lake Michigan look like? What does it mean? And thus, what do we need to do to get there? As an example, I would say if a gallon of water is showing up in one community and costs, $50 per 1,000 gallons, and it's showing up in another community and costs $2 per 1,000 gallons, there may be something wrong in how we're managing Lake Michigan water, because that has a disproportionate impact on communities of color and low-income communities more broadly. And so what we need to do is take these values, flesh them out a little bit, and then interrogate those different issues to make sure that our recommendations are consistent with and oriented toward these values. I know Naomi Davis from Blackstone Green was going to say a few words. I'm not totally sure if she's jumped on the call yet to add on to what I was just saying. Naomi, are you on? clear if she is. So again, what Annalisa is going to talk about here in a minute is our commitment to participating in subcommittees and participating in the process. And what we'd really like to do sooner rather than later is hammer out the values and principles that we really do want to use to orient this plan toward, and then start to interrogate within the primary issue areas of groundwater depletion and others. What does climate change resilience mean for that? What does environmental justice mean for that? What does equity mean for that? And that's going to take some time, but I think that's going to make sure that our recommendations and then our implementation steps are really driving in the right direction. Next slide. Which I think is me transitioning to Annalisa. Take it away. Annalisa from the Alliance for the Great Lakes.
Hey, thanks for the intro, Josh. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Anna. Yes.
But yes.
You are all muted. But yeah, Josh and Diana gave a really great sort of setup of the framework we're looking to help establish here. A piece of that too is really around the planning process itself. And so on your screen, you can see some of the priorities we've outlined for the process focused on transparency, collaboration, and public input. These are also things that we plan and are offering to support throughout. So what is that? What do we mean by that? First, the subcommittee and public meetings really should be conducted as part of a cohesive strategy to ensure that public input is included and that the outcome then is a well-integrated state water plan and not a disjointed product of sort of a piecemeal process. This goes back to what Lauren was saying too about doing the work needed to break down silos so that we can operate as one sort of cohesive team to get a meaningful water plan. Additionally, the task force should have a comprehensive communication and engagement strategy. For example, in public meetings, constituents should really understand not only how to get involved, like time, place, call-in number, or whatever, but also why the state water plan matters and how their involvement will meaningfully contribute to a better outcome. This also means that comment opportunities should be accessible by mail, email, allow for open-ended responses to ensure maximum participation. And then lastly here, the NGO community is a resource to you all, and we and local leaders around the state should be part of creating and supporting a state water plan engagement strategy that prioritizes equity and public input. Next slide, please. Awesome. So in terms of the implementation and subsequent plan updates, we also want to see an expanded state water plan task force. We understand that there may be some legislative action needed, as Lauren pointed out, but we'd like to see sustained NGO and non-state presence on the task force. We also think that we can be helpful in advocating for funding, identifying new and emerging threats, and like Ayana was saying, really ensuring that we're able to mobilize our constituents, our networks, and ensure diverse representation in the process. We also want to see a plan that's updated more frequently, and that annual updates on progress toward plan goals are given and made publicly available. Next slide, please. Awesome. So just to wrap up here, to sort of recap what we've shared about our vision, our priorities are that diverse stakeholders are represented. That means state agencies, NGO, industry, the public, and that we are actively informing the work of the task force and the final product that is the state water plan. We want to see a mission and goals that are principled, that prioritize equity so that we really are protecting and managing water resources for all of Illinois. We want to see a well-integrated plan that includes robust public input and an actionable state water plan that has direct sort of applicability to administrative, legislative, and budgetary development that's going to really drive action. And I think that's in line too with what Lauren was presenting earlier at the top of the call. So I think that's our last slide. And I'm gonna go to the next one. Great. So from here, I think we can just go ahead and open it up. Can we do a quick time check, Lauren? How much time do we have left on this section? for questions.
I might defer to Wes, or he can correct me, but I would think that we could probably take 5 or 10 minutes at least to take some questions and discussion here, see how it goes.
Great.
I guess
Yeah, I'll concur with that, Lauren. We probably even have a little bit more time if it's needed.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with a comment, I guess, back. You'd mentioned more frequent updates, and the task force has had that discussion and totally agrees on that, we're not trying to create a plan that's going to take us the next 40 years. We're really looking at a plan that's focused on, say, a 5-year period and actions and what needs to happen in that period, with the intent to, again, have updates on a more frequent basis going forward. So with that, I'll open up to others that might have questions for the Environmental Council.
I'm not sure how we get recognized here, so I just barged in as I usually do. I guess I have 2 problems or 2 questions. I've been involved, or I'm currently sort of on 3 of the committees. Water quality hasn't really done anything that I can identify yet. But it looks like the navigation plan is being handled in a manner that's exactly the opposite of what Deputy Director Rogner suggested, insofar as it appears that this plan's being written by IDOT and the marine industry without any input from environmental stakeholders, and then it's going later to be presented for public comment, which I assume will allow us to give 30 days to object to everything we don't like that the navigation guys put together. So I think we're going to have a problem there, or at least it seems to contradict the process that was suggested by the department. Finally, the law committee, I've just exchanged a few emails. It looks like they see their role on Illinois water law as summarizing existing law. I was hoping we could do a little better than that and actually propose changes in law if necessary. So those are my comments. I don't know whether those need discussion, but they do definitely need to be considered by IDNR. Thank you.
I don't know, BJ or somebody from IDOT, did you have any comments back for Albert, or any response?
Yeah, Albert. This is BJ Murray with IDOT. Our plan is currently being developed. It's a Illinois Marine Transportation System Plan and Economic Impact Analysis Study. It is really focused on commercial navigation and how the waterways are used within the state of Illinois for the transfer of goods and services. And we do have a consultant, which is WSP. I don't know if you're familiar with the old Parsons Brinkerhoff, Chicago, but that's who's the prime on the study. And we have established a very large stakeholder group steering committee who has been reviewing information. And I think I had stated that
environmental groups are on that stakeholder committee.
I know that the Upper Mississippi Umbra is on there. I'll have to go back and look and see how many of them are on there.
Let's not go on, but I think we'll talk about this at greater length. I don't believe that you have any of the IEC members on that committee, which is apparently putting the plan together.
Okay. I tell you what,
that's a problem.
If you would send me who you think should be on there, we could certainly look at that and address that.
Lydia, Dorothy, and I, at least.
Okay. Yeah, if you'd send me your contact information. But yeah, we have had several stakeholder meetings and reviewing of materials that have been presented, and then once the stakeholder group reviews and we make those necessary changes, then it will be put on the IDOT website for public review and comment. So, if you feel that the environmental groups would like to participate more than that, yeah, I think we can accommodate that some way, shape, or form. So yeah, so just make sure I have your contact information, and we'll send you the information as it's presented.
This is Josh. I just have I guess a process comment or suggestion following on Albert's question. It sounds to me like within the structure of the state water plan, there is a navigation subcommittee that has some people on it. And then outside the construct of the state water plan, there is this commercial transport plan that BJ was just describing, which has advisors on it. And my question, which there may not be an answer to right now, but we'll need one, is what is the integration of those two planning efforts? Are they aligned around the same set of goals? And if that's happening for navigational issues, are there other planning efforts in Illinois going on right now which should overlap or connect with the different components of the state water plan? And do we also have things moving on parallel tracks there? So that's just an observation and a question to address now or later.
Well, I guess I'd like to say one thing, and I think our directive for the state water plan was really just to develop I'll call it a brief summary. And so what we did was we provided basically a 1.5 page. It was almost a kind of a summary of the different system components, the number of rivers, the number of navigational miles, what they were, and that type of stuff, and then have a link to our final plan. So it was, it's very brief in nature in what is being provided as far as part of the state water plan.
Wait a minute. Again, it sounds to me like you've got IDOT writing a plan to facilitate the navigation industry, which is going to be shown to us when it's done. Is that the process that you envision?
No, it'll be shown to you before it's done, and we'll accept comments on it.
So there's a larger issue. First off, we really appreciate you meeting with all of us. Thank you for taking the time. All of the IEC members here, I'm sure, appreciate the courtesy of doing this. The larger two issues that I have questions about is, I know that a lot of us have worked with each of your agencies in the past on initiatives regarding our rivers. We would greatly appreciate an understanding of how we could be on the subcommittees. I know that we've introduced a list to you. If it would be feasible to integrate us into those subcommittees, we would be grateful. Letting us know how we could do that as expeditiously as possible so we don't lose ground would be wonderful. In addition, on Josh's point, I'm curious, there are understandably the 13 areas of the plan with the social justice overlay on top of everything, right? Which makes sense. But I am curious as to how we're not going to silo and how each one of these sections is going to be written in concert with and to dovetail into all of the other sections, so that, since water has a tendency to have multiple implications, which is an understatement, we don't miss the significant connections. For instance, Albert was saying navigation, water quality, recreation, so that we ensure that the plan reflects and elevates all of the uses in the waterways that are integral to our systems.
Thank you, Stacy. This is Lauren. A couple of comments on that. We do have the integrated water management as one of the issues on there, and part of that issue is exactly what you said about the collaboration and connection and communication of the agencies on the water issues together. And like I said in my opening remarks, kind of that unified front. One comment that I will make for the sake of the Environmental Council is that, we are still in kind of the beginning of this. We're not at the end of the water plan process. COVID delayed our initial outreach that we were planning to have, but we are kind of in the position, and we'll get to that here later down the agenda, where each of the lead agencies hopefully has kind of defined what they see that those issue words mean and what kind of sub-issues fall under that. And so we're really at the point in the plan development where we've done that and intended to reach out to say, well, here's how we're defining the issue. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to deliver the message that we're closer to the beginning of it than we are to the end in terms of working through. So we have not gotten to that point where we have started to say, well, this is the recommendation, or this is the way we're going forward. That's yet to come. And so that's why this engagement now is so vital and healthy, that we can engage at this point as the plan is developed.
Lauren, this is Lauren Lurkin from the Illinois Farm Bureau. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lauren.
I'm, like Albert said, I don't really know how to raise my hand here, so sorry for butting in. But I guess I initially thought that this question and answer, or question and discussion period, would be on the IEC presentation in particular, but it seems to have gone a little bit broader than that. So I'm going to take advantage of the broadening and just kind of make a point here. First of all, I appreciate the heads up from you that, you would offer the Illinois Farm Bureau or even the agricultural community more broadly an opportunity to do just what IEC did here today. And I wasn't sure what today would look like because we haven't heard about the plan in quite some time. So we will certainly explore that opportunity in the future. But I guess when I first heard about this effort about a year and a half ago, we started coming as the state's largest farm organization to the meetings that the agencies had. And we also started our work by looking at the document that is multiple decades old. And you and I and your colleagues there have talked about the history here of, 30 plus years ago, my predecessor at the state chamber, the Illinois Environmental Regulatory Group, and a super broad set of stakeholders was really engaged for a very long period of time in the development of this. And so that really, from day one, has been the Illinois Farm Bureau's goal here, is to make sure that we can understand the role of stakeholders. So to the degree that the Environmental Council has talked about that, I think that very much mirrors what the Illinois Farm Bureau has been saying for a year and a half. What's new to me today, and it's not confusing to me given what's going on in the world, but it is confusing to me in the context of this plan, is really this new element of EJ overlaying all of the issues. That is news to me. That this plan in particular is meant to address that major issue. So I guess I just wanted to say that I appreciate the this is more attendance than has been at any of the meetings that we were at, but I would encourage DNR as the leader of this effort and all of the other state agencies, and if Lieutenant Governor, if Levi is still on, the administration more broadly, to really include many stakeholders, including that of the business community, that of the environmental community, that of the ag community, and a million others that I'm not even thinking of. So that way you have a plan that reflects reality in the eyes of many. Thank you.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, thank you, Lauren. As I mentioned at the beginning of the intro, and as John Reigner alluded to, right, we did this as a volunteer effort of deciding it was high time to update the plan, and began that process even before, this administration had come into office. Once this administration realized what was up, they've embraced it, right? And then now that they're engaged in understanding how we're moving forward and developing, updating the plan, they had voiced into strong support of including the environmental and social justice as part of the plan. And so that we didn't have that kind of direction from the previous administration, or that it was that high of a priority, but this administration has voiced an encouragement to all the state agencies to to do that. They're excited about the updates of the plan, and just wanted to make sure that that part of it was included in it as well.
Lauren, can I add something else? This is Josh again. I think one of my points of confusion and what, again, is maybe part of Albert's comments and others is, what is the hierarchy of planning efforts here? If this was a municipality, you'd have a comprehensive plan, and then which covers a whole bunch of things and lays out that community's goals for itself. And then you would have a transportation plan that aligns transportation priorities with those overarching goals, or housing, or parks, or whatever. I guess my question that I'd like to get some resolution to is, are the other planning efforts, whether it's a navigation plan or Illinois EPA tweaking the state revolving funds or anybody else doing anything, if they are all meant to align to a set of values and higher order principles as set out by the state water plan, that to me makes a lot of sense, but I'm not sure that that's mutually agreed upon by everyone or clear within these other planning processes. And I'd like to get some clarity there. And again, we may not get that today, but I think that's an important one to get clarity on. As I read the initial enabling language for the state water plan, it does suggest that the purpose of that document and process is to lay out those overarching goals for other more issue specific efforts to align to. And then to the point from the Farm Bureau, yeah, be clear, IEC members are very happy for a wide array of stakeholders to participate. We heard about this and wanted to lean into the moment. And I think our intent in suggesting an array of goals, whether that's climate resilience or sustainability or environmental justice, is simply to make sure that the plan has goals other than completing a plan. So we'd welcome a conversation with everyone about what those goals are and how to align all the planning efforts toward it.
This is Lauren. Thanks, Josh, for that. And I think that's exactly why we're having these kinds of engagements, to get that kind of feedback. The plan obviously has, goals, and the plan was what the plan was in the past. And so as we do the update, that is part of what the task force, take into consideration. Are those goals still valid? Should they be also updated as well going forward? And so that's really what the initial outreach side of things was meant to do, was to get that kind of feedback. So appreciate that. Other comments, questions for the Environmental Council?
I just mentioned again, we discussed a little the navigation, but the scope of the law thing too is something that we'll have to look at. I didn't get any sort of reaction to that, but somebody can send me an email saying who I could talk to regarding the parent decision that the purpose of the Illinois state water laws group was simply to summarize existing law.
I think, Albert, that the plan that'll be part of it to do that. But obviously that chapter, if you will, would look to see what are the possibilities. I know in previous plans, there has been other legislation on some of those supply water issues that seem to go nowhere, right? There were some great ideas that have been out there. This process allows us to kind of pull those back out of the box, and new ones as well, and look at those. But then it takes the support behind the plan to try to drive some of those. So I think that the process does include looking at new legislation and new ideas that could go towards those issues.
Thank you.
I have a question before, and I just want to ask I know this part was kind of intended to ask IEC questions. So I do have a few questions. The first, I just want to ask, will there be a time set towards the end where we can ask more task force questions? I just don't want to take up too much time if we need to get further through the agenda. If I still have the opportunity to ask those questions to the task force at a later time in this meeting.
I would say we're in the discussion now. Let's take a few minutes and do that now before we move on to the third item.
Okay, great. One of the questions I had is, where will the surface water quality issues be covered?
This is Rick Cobb. We have a draft set of issue papers related to Clean Water Act issues and goals that were submitted to, I think I got those to DNR on Monday. And once again, they're just sort of a draft set of issues, but there's groundwater issues, drinking water issues, Clean Water Act issues laid out in the draft with recommendations.
Okay, and would it be possible to share that with IEC folks, or does it need to be reviewed first by DNR?
It's up to DNR. I mean, it's their. I mean, they asked me for it. Sanjay and Sofat and the folks in the Bureau of Water helped me with the Clean Water Act. Of course, I'm versed on drinking water and groundwater, so I certainly have no problem with it. That's what it was intended to do.
Okay.
So, and maybe I can clarify that a little bit. I think the intention was to work within the committees to come up with these recommendations or these identified issues within each committee. And then as we move to the public meetings, that's where we would be sharing this information. So I think the intent is that we'll be sharing all that information as we move into the public meeting phase of this process. So, as an aside from that, though, Wes, if any of the folks on the phone, we have an existing interagency coordinating committee on groundwater, and also a governor-appointed groundwater advisory council that has environmental representatives. That we're more than welcome to hold a WebEx with anybody that wants to discuss any of the issues.
Okay, so those issue papers and recommendations, that interagency committee, though, they're focused on groundwater specifically. They're not focused on surface water, right?
My boss and the whole bureau I'm in is focused on surface water. So I represent the Bureau of Water on that. So you can take a look at those issues and weigh in. I'm sure once you see them, you will recognize some of them. You know, like the environmental group's agreement with lowering of the phosphorus limit, for example, or the nutrient management strategy that all, environmental stakeholders have weighed in, or the reduction of, chlorides in surface water, groundwater, and drinking water. You'll see some familiar issues.
I was assuming that water quality committee was where those issues would be discussed regarding surface water. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. This is Rick Albert. Yeah.
Thanks.
And, I may have to go back to people, but I'm pretty, I know when I sent a draft set of issues on Clean Water Act stuff to Sanjay and Greg Good and Chris Davis and Scott Twait and the permits folks, I mean, they added a few things to the issues that I had. So we'd be willing to listen to whatever input you've got. And I get the whole pricing thing and equitability issues that you guys are bringing up. For example, I just read
Seth Siegel's book on troubled water, and, and the whole issue with water pricing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I understand what, we do have some big issues that would require possibly an entire legislative reworking of how things are done on that front, on water pricing.
Hey, folks. Thanks for that conversation, Rick. This is Colleen Smith, the Illinois Environmental Council. I just had a question, kind of going back to something that Annalisa laid out at the beginning, and I think something we've discussed broadly is, we understand that this is something the agencies, I think maybe it was you, Lauren, who said, we're doing this by volunteering. If there are resource needs for DNR to have this process and really have meaningful input and involvement from stakeholders and community voices across all parts of the state, has the agency given any thought to what that looks like, what that needs are? Is it a half FTE? If there is a proposal, I think our groups would like to talk about what that looks like and how can we support you guys getting some funding. But I'm curious, we're not going to do that if the agency isn't also actively asking for resources for this.
Well, absolutely. This is Rick. Absolutely. We've been decimated down. I'll reiterate what Lauren said. Part of our corrective action plan with US EPA for drinking water and groundwater at EPA and Department of Public Health is to fill those staffing holes and succession plannings, because we can come up with all the goals we want, but if we don't have any staff to implement them, good luck. So that's one of the issues, that we, Sanjay and I, have been working very hard on, is filling some of the, and likewise, Sanjay has been working on the Clean Water Act side. I mean, if you look at a floor plan over here and see all the empty offices, you'd be shocked. So, yeah, that's a big thing that we've been working on.
Sure. I was very much talking about getting more funding for the agencies overall, but I wasn't sure if there had been a, very clear to directors and governor's office that, this plan to be done right needs resources and here's an amount we think could use for it, et cetera. But certainly agree the staffing challenges you all are facing are a lot.
Appreciate that.
This is Wes. I apologize. I'm going to step in. Just give everybody a reminder. If you could be sure to mute your microphones. We are getting a few complaints that they can't hear speakers. So again, just appreciate if you're not intending to ask a question or make a comment, if you could please mute your microphones. Thank you.
What setting do I make a cup of coffee in?
Yeah, and this is Lauren. I guess I would make the comment on that, like I mentioned, we've just gotten the governor's office to understand and appreciate what the plan is. And so now that they know what it's about, could we go after research? We have not, as a task force, put together a plan at this point to do that. And of course, now that we're being told budgets are to be held where they're at or cut, at best. That's something that, as we identified, needs going forward, perhaps in the next step of what will it take to accomplish something, the resources could be requested. Any other questions? Any of the task force members that have questions for the IEC members that have joined us today? If not, it's a little after 11. We should probably move on to the next item on the agenda. All right, hearing none. the next item we have was really the status of identifying the issues. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're at that point where we've identified the kind of the top 13 of the many issues that we considered that we wanted to have again, a 5-year focus on those issues. And so we're at the point in the plan where we're working to identify those issues, what those issues mean and what kind of, subtopics fall under each of those issues, and kind of in draft form at this point. And the intent was for our first series of outreach meetings that originally were in April and now been postponed, was to present those draft of what is this issue, what does it mean, and what kind of sub-issues occur underneath that. And so today we wanted to go around the table virtually, I guess, and hear from each of the issue committees as to, where we're at on identifying what that means. And I don't know, Wes, do we want to go down the list as we have it listed, or what thoughts did you have there?
Yeah, my thought was if each leader and lead individual for each of the issues, we can just go down the list and just give a brief summary on where they're at in the process, and just give an update on from each leader. So if we want to start, it would be Rick Cobb from the EPA on water quality. Rick, are you there?
Oh, sorry, I have my phone on mute. That's what happens in this when you're using this technology. So we put together a draft list, and of course I'm in charge of administering the drinking water and groundwater programs, but have a lot of crossover with source water protection and participating even on the nutrient monitoring council and working hand in hand with the Clean Water Act side of the world. So basically our first issue were drinking water program deficiencies, to use SRF, et cetera, to fill staffing gaps at IDPH and Illinois EPA. Then we have Illinois Groundwater Protection Act implementation. I've got various parts of that, updating groundwater standards to, include perfluoroalkyl substances. We're working on proposing Part 845 to the board. These are all things that are on our plate. New and emerging issues. We've learned some things with University Park that we need to go beyond the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, and we do. So, we're trying to address that. We also have increased Legionnaire's disease. We have harmful algal blooms. And then it kind of gets to the Clean Water Act side of the world with hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And you've got the Illinois contribution and agreement with dischargers and environmental groups to reduce phosphorus. The ongoing support of these real goals, and then voluntary non-point source reductions. And then really chlorides in northeastern Illinois. It's not only a Clean Water Act concern, it's a groundwater concern, and it's a drinking water concern. University Park, for example, the chloride sulfate mass ratio, which relates to the amount of chlorides in the Kankakee River, could have enhanced galvanic corrosion that led to the lead in the drinking water at University Park. So that's a quick overview, and I think, the groups would, it's just a starting point for discussion. But obviously we have a lot of input from stakeholders on these groups, but welcome more. And, you know, with drinking water, we've always tried to the best that we can to think about environmental justice issues and involve Chris where we need to. We do have a GIS web service that overlays our EJ screen, which obviously is just, you know, is a screening tool, and we can overlay that with our source water protection areas, which now is source water protection plans are actually required in Illinois for the first time. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a nutshell of what's on the current list. I didn't go into all the detail.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I'm sorry, Lauren, going ahead.
I was just going down the list as well. So Dave, climate change.
Okay, hi. Yeah, very happy to. Right now, we're still in developing our overall draft of how climate change might be expected to affect state water resources with the timescale of the next few decades. Much of the document is we're trying to understand, you know, what's the current understanding of how climate, especially with regards to precipitation and temperature, how that's likely to change in coming decades. And so our focus right now is giving an overview of the science of where our current understanding is, and give some example scenarios of how climate change may impact agriculture, the urban environment, flooding across the state, and winter hazards, which hasn't been looked at quite as often. And finally, ending with several points. One is, what are the primary areas that we need additional research? There are a lot of questions that we don't fully understand, and which limit our ability to look at climate change and how that will affect us in coming decades. A lot of that is also the need for basic data sets that could be incorporated into models and made available to the public, such as soil moisture, such as detailed information on how precipitation will change from place to place. So those are so there's scientific goals, but also goals related to how we can put information out on climate change that would be useful to the public, to the decision makers, to those building infrastructure. As I said, we're still rather in the early stages of drafting this, partly because it affects so many of the other sections, but because many of the issues are much broader than climate change is not only Illinois, but it's affected by a much larger global scale, which we have less influence on. So that's where we are right now.
All right, thank you, Dave. Integrated water management, that falls in my lap. So the 1984 plan identified it as a cross-cutting topic in the plan at that time, as it cut across, several other issues. The 1984 plan saw integrated water management as a need for state programs to coordinate authorities for improved problem resolution. That's how it stated that, and suggested that could perhaps happen through interagency agreements. As we move into this update, the draft that I've put together has the integrated water management is state programs and even interstate programs coordinating information, authorities, and program resources for unified and improved problem resolution. Management of state water resources is provided by several agencies across the state of Illinois, yet those water resource issues are inextricably linked and often require that communication, coordination, and collaboration among those agencies and the impacted citizens and the engaged stakeholders. And so and in kind of diving into this topic, and as we've already talked about on the call today, it is still kind of a cross-cutting issue, even though we've defined it as a specific issue. But I would say that we've already made great strides compared to where things were in 1984. We have, the Illinois Natural Resource Information Systems, and we have the Silver Jackets kind of programs through the Corps of Engineers, where we are already coming together as state and federal agencies, sometimes involving other stakeholders as well, to have those kinds of discussions about who's doing what and why. In my mind, it almost becomes a resiliency kind of an effort that we can do more together than we can do siloed apart, as we've talked about. And if we're spending state resources on an effort, on a project, on a program, are there other goals that other state agencies have that could add to that effort and build value economically even, right? If we're building a flood control reservoir, does Department of Aging need a walking path in that particular community? You could go on and on about multi-purpose goals. And so that's kind of what I've drafted up here. We'll talk about in the plan about how we've made some improvements, and then we'll hopefully get some other, good recommendations and discussion about how we can move forward to improve that coordination and collaboration in order to create a unified and resilient kind of front. So that's where we're at on integrated water management. Long-term funding, IEPA, I know on our listing we don't have a lead individual. I don't know, Rick, was there somebody else in your shop that was taking that piece of it?
Well, as you know, Lauren, you had that conversation with Sanjay, and I think he already answered that question for you. I don't know if you recall what he said, but, we had came up with some ideas. Those never really went anywhere, but I will say that, it has helped us that the state of Illinois was covering the match for the state revolving loan fund, so we're able to fill a lot of those holes that I talked about. We also, have added more staff or provided money to the Illinois Department of Public Health to implement the non-community drinking water program by pulling some additional funds from the state revolving fund set-asides. So that's about all I've got right there. As you know, those kinds of discussions involve coordination with the director's office and the governor's office. So that's all I've got to say about that.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick. And I'll voice in too that we touched on this subject within the urban water urban flooding awareness report that DNR put together here, I think a couple of years ago now, because there are discrepancies out there in long-term and state funding about, one agency will have certain constraints that go with their money and benefit cost ratios and that sort of thing. And there are other programs that seem to have just free will to spend the state dollars at, based on their own kind of current defined criteria. So we did touch on that. We can pull that back up out of the urban flood awareness report as well. That State Water Survey helped us put together. So there's been some work on some of that in that report that we would probably look to incorporate in the plan as well. Move on to Wes and water sustainability.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I'm going to make this quick, seeing what time it is already. But I think Lauren Larkins alluded to it, that our efforts started about a year ago, where we quickly dived into those, what the problem issues are in water supply. And just to summarize, what I think the primary focus is going to be is on sharing of information, both on the water demand side and also water yield, or what is available in each of our water sources for the various uses. So we're working to provide that more openly to the public. We do understand there is some data that is confidential for commercial and industries, things like that. But we anticipate developing a web map to kind of show any critical areas. That way the public's aware of where we may have shortfalls in whether that be groundwater or surface water supplies, and essentially coming up with a sustainable water demand and use numbers for not only counties, but also for the public water supplies. What is their current demand? What is their sources, water availability, and how do those compare? And that will allow us to start working with those communities that may have shortfalls in supply, and be able to prioritize those and justify those. So we're looking at doing that on a statewide effort. There is some other issues we're looking at. Again, we probably came up with near a dozen, making IWIP data more available and steadily funded, and some other things. But that's a quick summary.
All right, thank you, Wes. Lake Michigan, Jim, are you on this morning? All right, he may have had to leave. I can give a quick overview there. We have talked about, obviously we're in the midst of a water reallocation effort right now, and how water out of Lake Michigan is shared. We also are entered into a resiliency effort, and that will reflect in the state water plan as well. Of course, being Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes system, a lot of that's done in collaboration with other Great Lakes states and Canadian provinces through the Governors and Premiers Compact Council or the Great Lakes Commission. But Illinois does have a group, a subcommittee that's working on resiliency under the umbrella of with the Great Lakes Commission as they look at resiliency on all the Great Lakes. And so a lot of that will play into that as well. Finally, we're dealing with, as the folks in the Chicago area are well aware, the very high lake levels and the erosion problems and challenges that brings that we'll want to highlight in the plan as well. So that's kind of a quick overview of, I know that what Jim was working on the Lake Michigan side. Moving on to flood damage mitigation. Tara?
Yes, we've had some committee meetings, and I did share my list with Ayana maybe about a month ago when all this started. So some of those are still revolving. Unfortunately, there's a lot of flooding issues we know from last year due to the high number of flooding that we have a lot of major issues, but we're really trying to pare it down or at least combine them into common thread. So one of the first issues that came up was data collection and modeling. We have a lot of hydraulic models and hydrologic models that need updating, and a lot of times they don't include future land use or climate change impacts. We know that the soil or the water survey just developed a new rainfall data publication, and we need to incorporate some of that into some of the models, and that they need to be updated. A big issue for us is that we don't have a central repository for all of our flood studies and mapping, so we wanted to highlight that and get some ideas brought forth. And we always need new data collection for those flood studies and operating projects to make sure that we have the most current data for when we do that hydraulic modeling. Another issue that we've seen a lot of, especially in the urban areas, is a stormwater sewer performance is generally undersized for the latest climate change related rainfall impacts. So that's a concern. And a big one that we're currently working on is that we would really like to have some real-time mapping tools for communities to use during flood events to help them predict potential damage and to focus on where they should be putting their resources. And then in terms of mitigation, Illinois is very strong in mitigation, and we've made a lot of progress, but we still have about $250 million in project requests that we need to move forward with. We also want to touch on some ideas about how to strengthen floodplain ordinances and stormwater management ordinances to make them stronger and more resilient for the future. And just talk about some sort of way to get some funding using a similar clean water revolving fund to help with some of the stormwater projects, just to make sure that they're sustainable and helping to reduce flooding impacts. But that's all I've got right now. And again, we've got a lot of ideas. We're just trying to refine them.
Thank you, Tara. Moving on to aquatic and riparian habitat. Brian or Leon, are you on? Maybe unmute. All right, we'll have to check in with them and get back. We'll move on to the water use laws and regulations. Steve?
Yeah, just wanted to talk a little bit about, we did have a meeting about a year and a half ago with Ag and outgoing director Gary Clark. He kind of gave a little bit of a history of some of the groundwater regulations that have been used in the past, and some proposed changes to the law that did not even get to be law. I think we're going to look at some of what happened there to see if there is a need to propose additional laws. I think one of the things more recently, we have had some inquiries with regard to pulling water out of some of the rivers in Illinois. Most probably the biggest picture's probably been with the Kankakee River, with some of the problems with water supply that they're having in Joliet. We have issued permits under our Part 3708 rules and our public waters rules. We've looked at some other places where, we do have some interaction within our floodway construction and public waters, where we're having folks take water out there. In addition, to add on to some of the Lake Michigan, to add on to what Lauren had said, we have had some interest in folks taking, using some of the allocations in other places. Like Lauren said, it is a shared resource. We've had some inquiries at OWR to try to, I guess, try to optimize what is getting taken out of Lake Michigan. And I think that there's been some, on our side, it's just like, it's not really, we're not looking to optimize it, and we'll probably include some of that in our report as well.
All right, thank you. On to navigation. BJ, you've already shared quite a bit about the navigation side. Is there anything you or Clayton would like to add?
Yeah, I'll just mention that Clayton is now, he has taken another job within IDOT, so he probably won't be too involved in this. But anyway, yes, I have already provided some information, but I did want to just make a statement that the state of Illinois had never done a statewide marine transportation system plan. So that was our effort, and it was to be tied to our long-range transportation plan. So initially, we were looking at the inventory of the system, the number of rivers that are navigable, and the public port districts, lock and dams, ferries, cruises, and those type of things, and then look at the number of type of commodities and tonnages of commodities that are moving through, around, and into the port districts. And then also, as a result of that, look at economic impact of the ports to the local, regional, and state economies. And so that was essentially what our Illinois Marine Transportation System Plan is. And then we were going to take that and dovetail it kind of into the state water plan update. So.
All right, thank you, BJ. Yeah, I know that there was kind of a lull there when, especially when Water Resources left the DOT and became DNR, and a lot of that fell within Water Resources, and we left that with DOT, and those were some very seasoned individuals that retired soon thereafter, and so things kind of were in a lull, and so really appreciate IDOT's efforts to get that up and running again as an active program going forward. So the timing works well with all of IDOT's efforts to re-engage on those issues at the same time we're creating the updated plan. So thank you. Erosion and sedimentation, Department of Agriculture. Brian, are you on? All right, we'll have to come back to Brian or get an update from Brian. Let's move on to data management. Laura.
Hi, yeah, the data management group in the 1984 plan was identified as, stream data measurements. There really was isolated a lot to a lot of the stream flow, I think some of the channel geometry information, things like that, and discussing the state of what is the adequacy of that data, is more stations needed, where are they needed, and that developed into a couple of studies over the decades too that were performed by Water Survey and others, helping to identify multiple agency needs for a common network operated by the USGS primarily. For this group, we're working right now really trying to re-examine the background of that original committee. It was considered an operational topic and not so much a critical issue because it really crossed into a lot of the other critical issues because of a common set of data that everyone uses, like for hydrologic and hydraulic modeling in particular. So we're working on that background. I have to admit, we have suffered from being volunteer and a lot of bandwidth not there. So we are a little slow out of the gates at this point, but our task is going to be then really identifying and working with the other committees as to what is it that they're needing in stream data that is lacking, and working with multiple agencies on that. So we haven't gotten as far, but it's an important topic, and we're in progress.
All right, thank you, Laura. Recreation. Mike, are you with us today?
I don't think he is, Laura.
Okay. Question then back to BJ on the stuff that you're doing. Is that incorporating a recreational component as well, or not?
There is just a paragraph. There's not a whole lot of recreational in there, but based on current events, we may have to bolster that up a little bit. So I guess I'll leave that as to be determined.
All right. Well, I want to be mindful of our time, but I'll open it up. Are there any other questions for any of the individual agency leads that presented? All right. Hearing none, then Wes, I guess I'll turn it over to you to item 4 on the agenda of review of the schedule.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. So as we all know, we have been drastically delayed in what our initial plan was for reaching out, doing our public outreach efforts. It was planned for this summer, and it looks like, I guess, depending if all goes well, we're hoping for maybe a September or October outreach. That's all pending the phasing that we have as we recover from COVID. So that's what we're hoping for, but again, we are still kind of in a waiting to make sure that we move through the phases and allow to meet in large size groups, as we anticipate public outreach may exceed groups of 100, especially in some locations. With that, I think a lot may be on hold beyond that. See what kind of feedback we get in that outreach, and also with our partnerships that we have right now. So as you can see on the schedule, everything's kind of to be determined. So we're kind of in a wait and see. There's also been some discussion if we need to slow down the process. I think we initially had a goal to have this completed at the end of 2020. And with COVID and with some of the issues that are being raised, there's a question if that gets kind of slowed down a little bit and given a little more time. So that's all being under consideration right now as we're kind of in this holding pattern.
Yeah, I guess I would say that's a given that we're COVID caused us to bump everything, and so we'll again see as we go through the phases of how that impacts the schedule. I would open it up, to the stakeholders that are on the call with us today and our partners. If you have insights and ideas on how we end up doing outreach in a particular way, given the constraints we may have on the phase as we open back up, we would welcome those insights and thoughts as well.
Hi, this is Mandy.
Go ahead.
This is Mandy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm with MPC, a communications consultant, and we are working on the public survey. And one of my questions is whether that survey might be sent out, if it would be useful for those drafting portions of the section to have the feedback via the survey, even before the public meetings, so that, some of that input could be incorporated into the initial drafts. And perhaps we could even time it so that the survey helps to promote the public meetings as well, or maybe that's not important. But that's just a question that I wanted to put out to the group, as when we would want to gather that public input via the survey.
Yeah, and I know we had chatted about the timing of that and doing that kind of in conjunction with the initial outreach sessions that, of course, then impacted by COVID-19. So your idea of maybe going out now while we're still in this kind of a phase of having to do things remotely and virtually makes some sense. Any other thoughts from the task force on that?
Yeah, Lauren, I thought one of the concerns we had was making sure that we're sending out or giving some background information to the public before we ask for these comments. And I guess we just don't want to, to put it better, I'd worry about the confusion that may result in the survey without giving that background presentation of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we're kind of trying to achieve, as Josh Ellis kind of mentioned a little bit. So giving that background may be beneficial as we provide this survey, so that those taking the survey have a better understanding of what we're doing and why.
Right. We had talked about maybe capturing, even a PowerPoint or one of these types of meetings, through WebEx, kind of capturing the recording or capturing it through Zoom or whatever, and offering that as one option for background for folks, those who would, want to kind of wade in that way, and then maybe a short version. I guess I would be open to hearing people's thoughts on when something like that, with enough background could come together. I think the survey, we've talked about doing it in both English and then translating it into Spanish and sending it out via SurveyMonkey. I think it could probably be ready in July, toward the end of July or middle of July. If we think that there is a background piece that could accompany it, on the same timing, we could even share, in August, the survey, thinking that maybe in the fall there'll be more public meetings. Is that a achievable goal to have a backgrounder piece that's, similar to some of the presentations we've walked through, but maybe has a little bit more background on each of the topic areas?
So yeah, Mandy, I think our initial, when we talked about this months ago, was to record the Springfield presentation and share that as a video. I think the question now is, given the current circumstances, do we do a standalone recording and provide that earlier than the public outreach effort? So, I think that's something we can do. It's just a question if that's a direction we want to take, and I'd leave that to the group to discuss and decide.
If we did go that route, it would be feasible to be able to provide that presentation to groups like Prairie State Conservation Coalition and Chicago Wilderness and Vital Lands as well. Open Lands would be happy to carry that, so that at least people are advised as to a preliminary understanding, given a preliminary understanding of the planning effort. And that could queue up further public engagement.
Yeah, I will say that it'll cause the first portion of our public outreach effort to be a little redundant for those who've already watched the presentation, as the first part of our public outreach was going to be kind of a background overview. I think that's fine, because I just would hate if we would have some people not show up because they've seen that background and miss the opportunity to interact with these various agencies that are part of the task force on a face-to-face basis to discuss the issues proposed or issues they think need to be addressed.
Yeah, I guess I like the idea of perhaps a summary of sorts that would go with a survey, and I think it's good to try to work towards putting something like that together and see where we're at. Come, like you mentioned, Mandy, the end of July, early part of August. Well, let's see where we're at that time. Are we still, going to be constrained in a great way, and then we really want to go, or have we opened up much more than we thought we might? It also might make a nice resource to have for those that, found out that they wanted to attend but couldn't attend the outreach for whatever reason, that they could have that resource available as well.
Yeah, I think in my experience, having information available via multiple platforms doesn't quell any public input. It only amplifies it, allows more of it. So I would encourage multiple ways for the public to learn about the survey, whether in person or virtually, especially these days, and provide their input.
Any other thoughts from the task force on that item? I guess I would say that we could work with you, from the chair's perspective. Again, it's critical to get the information, much of what's been shared today, to put into some sort of a summary as we would work with MPC and their outreach to develop that kind of a product that we could share with the group before sending out.
That sounds good. We'll touch base offline. Thank you.
All right. Back to you, Wes. I guess we're on to item 5.
Yeah, so I think the last thing is just kind of wrapping up this meeting, discussing, a September meeting is still questionable whether or not that can be done in person or by web meeting, similar to this one. Ideally, we like to meet face-to-face at the DNR building. Hopefully we have that opportunity. We do have a room reserved just in case. But again, we'll kind of wait to see what the direction is on that. So I guess the only other point is to discuss the focus of that meeting and any other comments that the task force may have.
Well, I think the focus ended up being like it was intended to be the meeting before this one, right? Where it would be the meeting we would have just before really conducting any of the first round of public outreach to make sure that, you know, how and what we're doing as the outreach. Perhaps, as we just mentioned, we would have the other resources and tools that we could review, the survey and so forth, that we could cover that. And I would see the focus of that meeting really being how will the outreach sessions go, and how do we want to accomplish the most that we can from that.
Does any other task force members have any suggestions or recommendations on things that we need to cover in the next meeting? I have discussing the details of the outreach and reviewing the survey. Lauren, did I miss anything?
Nope, that's what I have on my notes.
And Lauren and Wes, this is Rick. I don't know. I just wanted to mention something that, you know, there was a lot of talk about a plan, you know, just being a plan that doesn't have real implementable goals. And I don't know how many people on the phone are aware of some of the past, but in the groundwater related job, you know, that a lot of us do, and the interagency coordinating committee does, and the groundwater advisory council. When I started in 1985, we started with the underground drinking water strategy that was produced by the State Water Plan Task Force in 1984. So that was a result of the State Water Plan. It was underground drinking water strategy that led to several pieces of legislation and implementation. So for those of you that may not have had that background, that's how I started my career 35 years ago.
Nice to come full circle.
Yeah, I think a lot of the programs we have today, the water supply program was also a result of previous efforts. So I think that's the intention, is for us to review the current programs we have in place and also make recommendations if others need to come about.
Any other comments from the task force for the good of the cause? All right, well, hearing none, I would again like to thank our guests today and the stakeholders that joined us for this task force meeting, and particularly to the IEC. Thank you for your time and efforts and insights, and for preparing that information, and especially for all of your support, right? You've made it very clear that you're there to help and support and provide resources, and that's duly noted and appreciated. So we appreciate your participation today and that overview. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we will be seeing that perhaps from other stakeholders as well. Lauren Lurkin made reference to the fact that perhaps the Farm Bureau would like to give a similar kind of a presentation at some point in the future as well. So thank you all. With that, I think we will close the meeting, and thank you very much for all of your participation. If you've got questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to each of those individual issue leads, or you can always get a hold of Wes and I that are serving in the chair role for the task force on the development of the plan. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll close the meeting.